Slashes, huh? What's your favorite scary movie?
Not that one.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking, do I have to be the world's champion blind lady? We're talking, oh no, I only threw Unbreakables. And we're talking, this is the big bad world, full of mean people where nasty things happen. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking Try Lighting Your Match Now, Mr. Rote.
Oh boy. I love Susie. I love me some Susie in this movie.
I love Susie so much. Everyone, we are discussing, finally, after I feel like years of just constantly referring to this film, Terrence Young's 1967 classic, Wait Until Dark, starring Audrey Hepburn, and probably the only film we can cover of hers. Although,
yeah,
I will be pushing Charade one of these days, because I think it falls into the genre umbrella.
That's true. I feel like we've almost talked about Charade more than we've talked about Wait Until Dark. But yes, of course, folks, this is infamously disability horror, but with a fun twist. I'm going to say no queerness. This is just because we want to talk about this movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although, I don't know. I think Alan Arkin has some flamboyant tendencies. Although I think that may just be because he's on every drug imaginable.
Oh my God. No, I feel you, because he definitely gives off diva behavior, like the sunglasses indoors at night, sir.
With that hair? Like, what is that hair?
A grease stain.
Okay, but before we get too much deeper into this, I want to bring in our guest, who I'm so excited to talk to. Everyone, they are a multiple award-winning, multiply disabled queer horror and documentary filmmaker. They have presented at South by Southwest on various topics in disability and accessibility in the film and television industry, and are the creator of Access Horror, a film festival and summit celebrating disability and horror. They are also the host of Rid the Omnibus, a podcast that discusses social justice through the lens of pop culture. Please welcome Ariel Baska.
Hi, it's so great to be here.
Yes, so great to have you on this film. We have literally been wanting to cover this for years, and we just haven't gotten around to it.
Well, I'm very curious as to why you've wanted to cover this film for years, because this is a film that's been incredibly significant to me in my life, because the first time I ever got involved in theater was with a production of Wait Until Dark, the play.
Ooh,
and
amazing.
so I literally watched it probably 30 times over from the wings, and watched the film probably about that many times as well. So when I say I am an expert in this movie, I think I kind of, you at least sort of qualify.
So it's safe to say that you like this movie?
Actually, no.
Okay.
Interesting.
Here we go. Here's the thing, Ariel. We love a guest who likes things we don't like and vice versa. So this is going to be great.
Okay. All right. I'm excited. I mean, there are things, don't get me wrong, there are things I love about this movie, or I would not have watched it so many times. However, there are more things that I hate about this movie from an ableist, misogynist perspective.
Yes.
So.
Okay.
I'm interested to talk about that, because honestly, going into this, I'd only seen this film once before because it was a college watch, but I loved it back then. I'm sorry, I actually start here. I actually found out about this film because it was, I think, ranked number 10 on Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments, way back in the early 2000s. And so I had known about the infamous jump scare in this film way before I ever saw the film. But I rented it via Netflix Mail when I was in college, and I watched it with my then boyfriend and two of my other gay friends. And even though I knew that jump scare was coming,
it's so effective.
Well, it was a wonderful thing. The four of us are all sitting on this couch. We're leaning in because the climaxes of this movie is pretty intense. And the moment that jump scare happens, all of us flat out jump and stand up off of that couch.
Nice.
Okay, not to be too ignorant, but I'm assuming our audience hopefully has seen this movie. So can you tell me what the jump scare is? Because I kind of don't know what you're talking about when you say jump scare.
So basically, it's the moment at the very, very, very end of the film. Rote has been seemingly dispatched, and Susie is at the staircase at the door. Yeah. She walks down and she walks away, and then Rote jumps out of the. So it's a literal jump scare. Actually,
yeah.
He jumps out and grabs her.
I see what you mean. It's funny because I've seen this film so many times. That moment is always kind of interesting for me because I'm always wondering exactly how they filmed that with wires. I'm assuming because
he jumps too far, right?
He entirely jumps too far, and there's no way. I
don't know, y'all. I mean, like, I'm a bit of a jackrabbit myself, so I think if pressed, I could jump like a 10-foot distance.
Wow.
Okay, sure.
I mean,
this is a podcast, so we can't make you do it. But, you know,
just have to take my word for it.
I would if you were on video, just so you know.
Honestly, you know what? Because I after this recording, I'm just going to go into my bedroom and just try to, like, see how far out into my hallway I can jump.
No, Trace, what I need you to do is I need you to go outside with Ari, and I need you to videotape yourself jumping as far as you can, and then we'll put it on social media.
But you have to be diving, like, horizontally. Like, it's like a long jump. Like, you are flat out just, like, diving for something horizontly. So, yeah, I'll
so now we're changing the parameters, is what I'm hearing.
Well, no, it's the parameters that the movie sets. But, well, John, I'm curious, when did you first see this film?
So this is an interesting one because I don't remember the exact first time I watched it, but I would have been relatively young because this wasn't just with my sister. My mother introduced me to this film. So this was very much Audrey Hepburn is in this scary movie. So she rented it and then she made my sister and I watch it with her. And I think it was primarily just because of Hepburn. She was like, ooh, I really want to see her not debase herself in a horror film, but very much like, ooh, she's classing up the genre. Because that's how my mom always approached horror. Like,
so this was elevated horror for the 60s?
Well, this wouldn't have been in the 60s, but yes.
Well, but the film itself was elevated for the 60s.
I mean, sure. Yes, let's put it that way. But so we watched it, the three of us, you know, kind of like huddled under the blanket with popcorn and that kind of stuff. And we had a really good time. And I never even questioned issues of accessibility or, you know, what it was doing right and what it was doing wrong. I was just really engaged with the idea of like, oh, here's a woman who's in distress. And it just so happens to be that she needs to use her disability to her advantage against her attackers. But I feel like that's what we're going to talk about today.
I think so, too. But I've got to say, I've actually got a pretty decent production history of this. So I'm just going to dive right in. Obviously, everyone
you're going to dive right in, huh?
I'm going to dive. Yes, not literally. So obviously, I'm pulling pretty much all of this from an article called Wait Until Dark, Terrence Young's terrifyingly effective suspense thriller with brilliant Audrey Hepburn and Alan Arkin on the website Cinephilia and Beyond. It's a very long headline.
I was going to say that is too long a headline. That seems like it was written for SEO, but go on.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, so Wait Until Dark, as we discussed, is based on Frederick Knott's play of the same name. Interestingly enough, Knott only wrote 3 plays in his life. The first being 1952's Dial M for Murder, which was, of course, adapted by Alfred Hitchcock in 1954. 1960's Write Me a Murder, and then 1966's Wait Until Dark being his last play. It instantly attracted the attention of both the audience and Warner Brothers, the latter of whom decided to adapt it with none other than Hollywood sweetheart Audrey Hepburn. So they soon acquired the rights to the play, and even though Lee Remick, the Omen First Lady herself, well, not First Lady, but, you know, whatever that position is.
We'll give it to her.
She originated the role of Susie on Broadway, but it does appear that Hepburn was the first and only choice for this role since the beginning. But the fun thing is this. Apparently, Hepburn urged Warner Brothers to announce the project early and make it clear to the public that Lee Remick was never a potential choice for the lead role.
Okay.
Do y'all have any inkling as to why this is the case?
They have some kind of beef, don't they?
Ariel, care to take a stab?
I mean, I don't know. Audrey Hepburn was pretty famously nice, so I think she just wanted to make sure that everyone knew she didn't steal it from her. I don't know.
Right.
So if you recall, 4 years before this movie came out, My Fair Lady came out. And
that's true.
Audrey Hepburn was famously the only actor dubbed of her singing voice in that film, and she quote-unquote took the part from Julie Andrews, who originated the role on Broadway. So she didn't actually take the part, but there were plenty of rumors going around at the time that she had stolen that part from Julie Andrews for My Fair Lady. And some people think that's why she was the only one really not nominated for an Oscar for My Fair Lady.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, when this happened again, she was like, okay, look.
I'm not doing this again.
I'm not doing this again. Also, fun fact, a pre-fame Robert Duvall originated the role of Rote on Broadway.
Oh, I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, no one can do this part better than Alan Arkin.
He is amazing.
I would have to see it, but yeah, there's just something. I know I made fun of his hair earlier, but I also find him oddly attractive in this movie.
Yeah,
of course, he's a sadist. What do you fucking expect? Come on.
How dare you, Ariel? You come on here and you read us within the first 10 minutes like this.
I mean, hello. Anyway.
Well, so they went to Alan Arkin instead, and at the time, he was a New York stage actor who had just had a Hollywood breakthrough with his performance in Norman Jewison's The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. But again, he wouldn't have been like a huge household name by that point.
Right.
Now, since Hepburn and her then husband, producer Mel Ferrer, who joined her on the project, they were good friends with English director Terence Young. Now, this guy, I had no idea. He's the director of 3 of the first 4 James Bond movies. So,
okay.
Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Thunderball. I guess he skipped GoldenEye, which, I mean, why? But weirdly enough, Hepburn, when she was 16 years old, had apparently met Terence Young because she was working as a nurse in the Netherlands during World War II, and she had treated some of his wounds. So, yeah,
okay, that's not how I thought that was going to go.
Right? So she and her then husband Mel Ferrer, they lobbied hard for him to get the gig, even though Jack Warner initially wanted the Third Man director Carol Reed in the director's seat.
That would have been a very different movie.
Yeah.
So, Wait Until Dark was adapted to film by screenwriters Robert and Jane Howard Carrington and shot by the Academy Award-winning cinematographer Charles Lang, who also shot films like A Farewell to Arms, Sabrina, Some Like It Hot, and How the West Was Won.
Those are very different movies.
Yes. But I would also assume that maybe because he worked on Sabrina, Audrey Hepburn was like, that guy.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the key aspects of this particular film, though, is its haunting musical score, composed by Henry Mancini, who also composed the score for Charade, but I digress.
Just keep putting it in there. Just keep getting it in.
Keep putting it in there. So he's mostly remembered, though, for his light pop and comedy compositions. So, he did Moon River and Breakfast at Tiffany's. He did the Pink Panther theme. He hadn't done really things like a genre film before. So he wanted to do something entirely different at this stage of his career. And I think he did that because this score isn't really typical for some of his other scores. So for this particular film, what he did was he built the score around twin Baldwin pianos playing the same chord, but one of the pianos was tuned a quarter tone flat. The difference in pitch giving the chords a distinctive yet highly unsettling feel. The rumor is, or the story is, that he played this to some of the people on the set and they told him to shut it off because it was creeping them out.
Really?
Yes.
I like that. I like that. That may be my new trick for unsettling actors on set.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a minute. Let me wheel in 2 sets of piano.
Hey, listen. My last set actually had a piano.
Did
right
it?
there,
Okay.
so I
There
just
you go.
have to find one.
And if y'all are curious and want to hear this specific piece of music, it is the piece that plays over the studio logos at the beginning of the film. Now, to what lengths Hepburn went to do her job properly, and I will put properly in quotes because I'm sure we will discuss this, but she spent a lot of time training for the role of a blind woman at the Lighthouse for the Blind in New York, where she was accompanied by Terence Young himself, who participated with her in their activities. But he says Audrey Hepburn was miles faster than him, quickly able to find her way blindfolded around the lighthouse rooms and corridors, and it was also Hepburn's choice to not wear lenses to cloud her eyes or wear sunglasses.
Okay. I appreciate that we're not doing the sunglasses thing, because that very much feels like, ooh, I'm just trying to hide it.
I mean,
Yes.
do we want to just kind of pick at this right now?
Well, can I pick at this a little bit
absolutely.
right now? Because this is a thing. So just so you know, the term for what Audrey Hepburn is doing in this film is generally known as cripping up. And,
Yes.
you know, playing disabled parts as a non-disabled actor is something that, for me, you know, I have a lot of issues with in general. I recognize that for a very long time, this was not recognized as a thing. And even today, it's not really a thing because 95% of disabled characters on screen are played by non-disabled actors.
Right.
Yep.
And as a result, authentic representation within the field of disability ends up being around 0.02%. If you consider parts that are written, directed, and acted by people with a disability. That said, you know, when I was age 11 watching this play on stage, you know, 30 times over, I kept thinking there was something that didn't quite connect, something that wasn't quite right, but I didn't have the language to call it cripping up.
Right.
And I'm blind in one eye, so I identify as low vision. But because I'm not blind in both eyes, I thought, well, someone has to know something about what it is to be blind. And maybe this is what it is to be blind, right? And it wasn't until 5 years later, when I met my first girlfriend who was blind, legally blind, that I realized, oh, wait, this is all bullshit. All I've ever been fed in this story of disability is absolute bullshit. And I knew more as a half-blind 11-year-old than anyone who worked on this production.
Yeah, it checks out.
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like so many of us in the disability community get narratives about disability from media. And it's so incredibly important, I think, to acknowledge that when studios and other disability agencies train people in how to crip up, they are perpetuating a system that ultimately does more harm to literally everyone because of the way that expectations are built up around disability. And it's not just about an authentic performance, it's also about how people perceive everything about who they are.
I'm curious, Ariel, have you ever heard of a stage production of this using a blind woman?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of productions actually that have been made of the revival that have done authentic casting and have done an excellent job. Unfortunately, community theater in rural Virginia wasn't really doing that jam.
Right. That, yeah. I mean, I was going to say that makes sense, but I hate even saying that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's interesting that when we talk about disability casting, you know, cripping up is unfortunately a very old tradition, and you can actually look in textbooks that people have written about how to play a disabled character.
Right.
And how to wobble like a bowl of Jell-O in your wheelchair, you know, to get the complete lack of agency right, you know? And so it's kind of gross and disturbing. And anyway, that's sort of my general ramble on that. But.
No, I mean, and again, I'm sure we will build off of that. And, you know, I was curious because I think the closest thing to a modern Wait Until Dark we have is Mike Flanagan's Hush, which also stars a non-disabled person in a disabled role, but his wife, Kate Siegel. I was curious what your thoughts on that movie were. If it handled, I mean, obviously it's not better because it's still a non-disabled person in a disabled role, but does that film handle things differently or in a way that's moderately better than how Wait Until Dark does it?
So I will say in that film, what's interesting about Hush is that the script is so much better.
Oh.
It's a script that centers the disabled character in a very specific way and is very much tied to the death experience. It is not something that pretends to know what it doesn't know. At least it was informed by someone with lived experience in terms of the way that the cinematography was designed. I'm still not a fan of the fact that there is cripping up in that movie, and that bothers me very much. And especially given that there are ways in which, knowing that Kate Siegel is Mike Flanagan's wife, she could have advocated for, hey, you really should cast, someone who actually has a disability. But it's a really well done film, all that said.
Yeah.
And I feel like the scares are very effective within it. So I don't have as many complaints about Hush as I probably should have.
Right. And folks, we do have a Patreon episode on Hush, so you can hear some of our thoughts there. The one that I would actually advocate for, Trace, is the Canadian movie See For Me, which we also have a Patreon episode on, which does feature a non-binary lead who is also disabled. So they're a very accurate reflection of the character that they play in the film.
Yeah. And See For Me is a great film too, because it's specifically looking at kind of the intersection of technology and the low vision experience in a home invasion kind of context. And I think it's very interesting what that film does. I will be honest though, I feel like of these three films that we just mentioned, Wait Until Dark is certainly the showiest and the most memorable. And so I think it's still important to always come back to what it is that makes this film so powerful and what in the disability representation on screen we can take and enjoy and, learn from.
Yeah. And I feel like we have similar conversations about queerness and whether or not, straight actors should be playing queer roles and that kind of stuff. And I feel like sometimes people think, oh, okay, well, they're just, doing their woke bullshit and they're advocating that people can only play themselves and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that's not what we're saying. It's just, it's appreciated when people take the extra effort to say, oh, should we try to find the most appropriate person for this? Because maybe the disabled person should be disabled because they're going to be able to capture that.
Well, okay. So, Wait Until Dark premiered just before Halloween in 1967 to critical acclaim and box office success. I was seeing $17.5 million earned on a $3 million budget. However, I was also seeing $7.3 million in rentals. So that's a $10 million difference. I don't, maybe it's also like re-releases throughout the years because, box office in the 60s wasn't really tracked in the exact same way as it is now, but.
Right.
Anyway, Audrey Hepburn got her 5th Best Actress in a Leading Role Oscar nomination, which she ultimately lost to Katharine Hepburn for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Interestingly enough, Audrey Hepburn was kind of bummed by this nomination because this is the second of 2 films she was in 1967, the other one being Two for the Road, and she thought her performance was better in that film and more deserving of the Academy's recognition.
Okay, an embarrassment of riches, I guess.
Frederick Knott and Arthur Pym's play was very successful as well, ending its Broadway run after a total of 374 performances. It is interesting to note, though, that Warner Brothers decided to market this film kind of in the way Hitchcock would have done, because I think also people describe this as like one of the best Hitchcock films that Hitchcock never made.
Right.
So they use this simple yet highly effective warning on all advertising to get people into the theater. And this warning said, during the last 8 minutes of this picture, the theater will be darkened to the legal limit to heighten the terror of the breathtaking climax, which takes place in nearly total darkness on the screen. If there are sections where smoking is permitted, those patrons are respectfully requested to not jar the effect by lighting up during this sequence.
The 60s, everybody. The 60s.
I also saw that they say don't light up. Like, okay.
Because people were smoking throughout the entire fucking movie.
And then in all underline, and of course, no one will be seated during this time. Which,
can you imagine coming into a movie with 8 minutes left,
Yeah!
just being like, yeah, I'm just going to take in the climax. Thanks.
So, but as I said, this was the second film Hepburn did in 67 after Two for the Road. It was also the last project she did before a nearly decade-long career hiatus. The reason she gave for this hiatus was that she wanted to spend more time with her family, which is true, but another factor would be that she was going through some emotional turmoil with her separation to Mel Ferrer. They divorced the following year, but seemingly Wait Until Dark was a last-ditch effort to save their marriage, but they announced their divorce about a month before the film opened.
Oh, that's a bummer.
And a year after this, she also married Italian psychiatrist Andrea Doty and had a second child with him. So, I mean, again, that's the whole family thing. You know, she's like, I don't want to work anymore. I also saw a lot of things where, like, apparently every time you sent her a script, she would say or do things to just not do it because she was so concerned with her home life. And so a lot of times when her friends would bring her a script, they would have to force her to read it, which could take weeks, and then convince her that it was good. And then maybe, just maybe, when she showed enough interest, she would start picking out costumes.
Interesting. The reticent movie star.
Yes. But the film's legacy was a lasting one. Again, as I said, Hepburn was nominated for an Academy Award and the Golden Globe for this film. The film ranked 10th on Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments, as I said. It was ranked 55th on the list of American Film Institute's 100 Years, 100 Thrills. There was a 1982 TV movie remake starring Catherine Ross as Susie and Stacy Keach as Rote.
Oh, Stacy Keach would be good.
Mm-hmm. And a Broadway revival of the play happened in April of 1998, ran for 97 performances, and this is the cast. So Marissa Tomei was Susie, and then the two men, I've got Quentin Tarantino and Stephen Lang.
Yeah, it's a famously awful performance from Quentin Tarantino.
Is he
That is
Rote?
not a good combination of
Yes,
cast.
he is Rote, and he, the reviews said that he was the slimiest, stupidest villain they'd ever seen.
I could see him for like the Carlino role, maybe.
That's what...
Where it's a bit dim, but a bit of a heavy...
Well, because I'm assuming Stephen Lang would have been Tall Man, but I could see Stephen Lang as the Rote character more than I could see Tarantino.
Yeah, I could
Yes.
too, right?
Yeah, that is just wrong casting.
But Stephen Lang was not a name then, so...
Right,
yeah. I mean, headline Marissa Tomei and Quentin Tarantino, that's going to get butts in seats, although it sounds like the reviews killed it before the money did.
Yeah.
Right.
But, that's all I got. So let's talk about what happens in this film, Joe.
Okay. And Ariel, feel free to chime in at any point if there's fun things that are different about the actual stage production, please.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, just so you know, the stage production is one location only, and the husband character never appears. So,
Okay.
you know, and honestly, the husband character is a big part of why I want to throw a fucking knife at the screen sometimes in this movie.
I mean, I think, because, is the backstory the same in the play where it's, so she is recently disabled. So she was in a car accident a year prior to the events of the film, but she's already married to the guy that saved her.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. That was my only question with the relationship. I was like, that's a really fast relationship, and I don't know if it's built on honesty.
It's a little weird, honestly, and a lot of the lines about the relationship are inserted into the movie that aren't there in the play. And I don't remember precisely how much of the backstory of the relationship, but it is a newly acquired disability.
Okay.
You know, because that's supposed to explain why she's afraid of fire and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Right. And a little untrusting of some of her senses and her geography.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, folks, we start this movie not quite in my neck of the woods, but not too far away.
I was going to say Canada.
Yes, Trace. Canada.
the world's leading supplier of heroin.
Truly, yes. Gateway from the north. We provide the U.S. with all of its heroin, notably. Yeah, so we opened with Louis, an uncredited Jean Duval, who is sewing up heroin into a doll, and he's doing this...
Can I actually point out that it literally opens up with ripping open a female figure on screen. And this feels like a very significant slice that kind of comes back to everything in certain ways for me.
This would be the misogyny that you spoke of earlier.
Now, curious, is it the film itself that is misogynistic towards Susie, or is it just the characters?
Oh, it's very much the film itself.
The film, okay.
I mean, you have maybe I'll get into that later, but I mean, this film does pass the Bechdel test, right? Because you do have Gloria and Susie talking to each other, but they're saying things like, I want to do important things, like cook a souffle, pick a necktie, choose wallpaper.
Good old 60s again.
Yeah. It's like, how male gazy can we get?
Yeah. Well, and literally we married someone whose gaze is the male gaze. Like, let me snap your photo. I'm waiting for a lady to come.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So we've got Louis. He's stuffing heroin into this doll, and he's doing this for Lisa, who is played by Samantha Jones. That name, but okay. And then she quickly cabs it to the Montreal airport, and I'm not going to lie, I do wish that Lisa lasted a little longer in this movie. I don't even know if she really even has any dialogue. We see her talk, but I don't think we hear what she says.
No, she does, because when the guy's putting the heroin in the doll, she's telling him to hurry up.
Right, yes.
So there you go.
Vital dialogue. But this woman is wearing an absolutely gorgeous fur coat. She carries the doll because she knows that her bag is actually going to be searched by the ticket attendant. So she just walks into the airport, gets the ticket, he checks the bag, and then the next thing we see of her is she is out on the tarmac boarding this plane. And I just thought, air travel in the 60s.
This also seemed very small for the Montreal airport.
Well, admittedly, Montreal and New York are not super far apart, so there might have been many flights a day, in which case we were just sending little small planes. But yeah, I did think the same thing. Typically you would have a slightly bigger plane.
But man, maybe it was the 60s. I don't know. Who knows?
Maybe, yeah.
It's hard to know because, I don't know. I can't even imagine what flying was like then because...
Right.
I mean, it's become so hellish and, I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We know for sure that this wouldn't have been cheap because you don't travel for fun unless you're a rich person. So we can assume that the heroin business is paying reasonably well because Lisa can afford to travel to go to another country and pick up drugs.
Yes, it's absolutely paying well.
Wait, drugs pay? Is that the lesson this movie is serving?
Yeah.
New after school special, kids.
There we go. The more you knew. So before she boards the plane, she does pass a bottle of pills to photographer Sam Hendricks, who is played by Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. And this will pay off when we arrive in New York because she sees that someone is watching her. And this will later be revealed to be Rote, played by Alan Arkin. But in the airport, before she can be approached, she passes the doll off to Sam. We see her give him some kind of instructions, and then the movie begins.
What I find really interesting, though, about Rote's appearance when he first appears in this film is that he looks like he's cripping up. Like, there's something about the wearing of the dark sunglasses in a film about a blind woman.
Right.
It's kind of interesting because I almost kind of want to see the version of this where he's pretending to be blind or something. But anyway.
Oh, that would be interesting.
I mean, look, I wouldn't say no to a modern remake of this just to see how this would play in modern times.
Personally, I actually have that project on the shelf if Warner Brothers ever actually calls me. I have the cast, I have the crew, I have everything ready to go because I really want to retell this story. But my idea for retelling this story involves a blind woman who is also a drug dealer. And who is a grower, and hence all the lights, and why she's a little out of it and doesn't, understand all the theatricals going on. So
interesting.
But it gives her a bit of an edge to which this Susie does not necessarily have.
Exactly.
Well, I think it also maybe makes her a bit more of a real person.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out that Ephraim Zimbalist, so he also got a Best Supporting Actor Golden Globe nomination for this film.
Wait, for this?
And to that I say,
what?
For what?
What did he do?
I don't
For being a man on a screen? What are we talking about?
Other than being the biggest, ableist asshole in the universe. How about that?
That's fine. Come to me, Susie. Follow my voice. I refuse to help you so I can make you independent. Also, cook me a souffle. Okay, so an undetermined amount of time later, we're introduced to Mike Tallman, who is played by Richard Crenna, as well as maybe former Sergeant Carlino, who is played by Jack Weston. I do like the fact that he bristles when people refer to him as Sergeant, because clearly he's not over the fact that he went to jail.
Yeah.
So we see them entering a basement apartment. They begin to search the place. Carlino makes himself a sandwich because it's the 60s. So because he's a little bit plump, he must be hungry. Because he's fat, oh my God, he's disgusting, blah, blah, blah. And then they realize, hey, Lisa can't fucking type. So this isn't her apartment. And whose is it?
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. So before they can make a hasty getaway, this is when Rote enters, and yes, he is wearing his sunglasses, his trench coat, his hat. He looks like a villain from Carmen Sandiego.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes.
But I love the fact that it's like this character's introduction. You know, we already are a little bit off guard because we just see these men entering an apartment that isn't theirs. And then a random other man who is even more nefarious looking comes in. And I love that he just blackmails them and is like, yeah, this isn't Lisa's apartment. Let me tell you what you went to jail for. I know all about you. Also, please remove your weapons so we can have a discussion. I've got a scam for you.
I will say I'm surprised that Alan Arkin didn't get more recognition for this film. He claimed it's because you don't get awards for being mean to Audrey Hepburn. Like, that's his famous quote about this movie. But
it's kind of funny.
I just think he's really, really like nefarious and just good in this role.
He is incredible in this role. And I, you know, like you said, he's incredibly attractive in this role. You know, yes, I'm probably outing myself as, you know, whatever. But I also feel like there is something to the way that he embodies sadism and evil in this role that is just absolutely out of this world, that I think paired with Charles Lang's cinematography, particularly in the third act of the film, I really feel like it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I just love the fact that he's not ostentatious about it. Like, he is menacing and very creepy. He's unsettling, but he very rarely raises his voice. Like, the fact that he's calm is what makes him so scary.
So the few times he kind of like betrays that low-key demeanor, it's like when he pulls the knife out first on Tallman and Carlino. But even in the end, I think because he's been so put together for most of the film, when he does start to lose it, like especially when she's throwing gasoline everywhere, I think that makes it more scary. It's scarier to me to see this person become a loose cannon as the film goes on.
Right. Yeah, it's something we would have expected maybe from the other two, but not from this guy.
Right.
Yeah. So, Trace, you mentioned Geraldine, that is the switchblade. And yes, folks, this is definitely a Chekhov's weapon. Stay tuned because you know that motherfucking thing's coming back.
I think in a single setting film, there's so many, like, don't forget, there's a knife right there. Well, put that in your back pocket.
100%.
And it's also interesting because, you know, there are so many things that they do in the script, in the film, that are a little different, that are like specifically, oh, just so you know, no one's around. Just so you know, her mother's out of town. So you know. And it's interesting because that's not in the play at all.
Right.
Obviously, because it's actually a single setting in the play. But then, like, you also have plants in there about like, I wonder how you unplug the refrigerator. Oh, that's coming back. You know, it's like all the Chekhov references you can possibly, you know.
Yeah, they're all over the first act. Actually, the first half of this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a bit of a fascinating piece, if only because this, you know, Ariel, you've said it a couple of times, this isn't exactly a one-setting movie, but for long stretches, it is.
Yeah.
And I think there's something fascinating about how we construct a story in an interesting way. You know, I'm thinking back to Trace, our discussion with Rope, where Hitchcock was doing the same idea, but he was so enamored with doing his long single takes that it ended up changing the way that you could negotiate that space. Whereas here we've got the flexibility to play around with it. I find this film really dynamic, even though we're principally in a basement apartment.
Well, because that's I mean, we've mentioned this before. It's the common critique with plays adapted to films, right? Like, can they escape the playness of it? And I think that's where Charles Lang's cinematography comes in. It's not particularly showy, but I don't know. I don't feel like I'm just watching a play captured on film when I'm watching this movie. Whereas I do feel that way about certain other films with the same backstory.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would argue it also comes down to the editing, because Gene Milford's editing is absolutely, astonishingly good. Even though, there are these long takes, there's a dynamic between Audrey Hepburn's performance specifically and the way that the edit transforms it.
Right.
That makes her character feel more
vulnerable.
Yeah.
I like it. I mean, I don't know if it's accurate, but there were many times where I found it very easy to not just empathize, but almost put myself into Susie's position of, okay, so say you had to close your eyes and you couldn't see, but you're relatively familiar with the space, I think the film does a good job of capturing her experiences of, okay, I'm not going to bump into furniture, but if suddenly there's a man and I don't know where he is, what would I do? How would I react? How would I negotiate this space?
I also do appreciate this about the script. Like, it specifically talks about how Gloria is coming in and constantly rearranging the furniture to be passive aggressive. I mean, that's very much a thing people do. And there's also the, references to how she can definitely hear people's breathing and so forth. And
so like the heightened senses thing.
But okay, but here's the thing. It's not heightened senses, actually. It's just a little more awareness of other senses. It's not like you suddenly get
not superpowers.
You're not a super crip, okay?
For sure. I just meant, but I feel like in Hollywood movies, that's what they do, right? It's like, oh, if you're blind, oh my god, you have super hearing now.
Yeah, you're not fucking Daredevil because you lost your vision, okay? Like, that's not a thing.
Wait, the Daredevil version of Wait Until Dark.
I mean, that would be
I know exactly where you are,
right?
bitch.
Okay, never mind. Scrap my original idea. That's what we're going with.
There we go.
Okay, so these three men sitting in an apartment that is not their own, weapons out. Here's the scam. Roach is going to pay them each $2,000 in 1967 money. And all they had to do was find a doll. It's somewhere in this apartment. So they're like, cool, okay. We figure it's probably in the safe or the locked bedroom closet. And just to prove that the other two are not idiots, we do immediately clock. Oh, it seems like Rode actually may already have the key. So we force it out of him and we open this closet. And lo and behold, not a doll, but poor Lisa's body.
Okay, I forgot about this. I think this is fantastic reveal. I love the way, because you can even see her in the bag as he opens the door, but only if you're looking closely. But the reveal of her face, like, oh god, this is great for me.
It's creepy, but again, it's not really super showy. It's not like she's covered in blood. Like, they probably strangled her, if we're being honest, because it's a quiet way to dispose of somebody. But even just this idea that, like, Susie and Sam have been hypothetically living in here, but we managed to get a bunch of people in and out of the apartment, and we've killed someone and just left the body for the time being. That is, ugh, it just makes my skin crawl.
And it doesn't smell, like, at all. Like, I know it's not, like, rotting yet, but I feel like there should be a smell there.
That's why she's in the plastic bag, baby.
I don't think
but here's the thing that's really creepy to me that I picked up on watching this film again today. And it's funny that, like,
31 viewings in.
Yeah. Today when I watched it, I was like, damn, he's creepy. Because, like, when Rote first walks into the apartment, he's got a carpet on his arm.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and it's like, I don't know why exactly. That particular detail struck me as so calculating and awful.
Well, do you think, I guess, because what does that imply to you? To me, that implies he was just coming to dispose of the body, but didn't expect these two guys to be here already.
Oh, no, he orchestrated it
He
so that they would be
orchestrated
here.
absolutely everything.
Oh, right.
About the whole procedure. And so this is very much like, and I'm going to make them roll up her body in this carpet, and I'm going to control this in precisely this way. And
well, that is my favorite part about the post reveal is these two men rightfully say, oh, we want nothing to do with this. And they try to leave. And he just immediately goes into blackmail mode and says, well, your fingerprints are everywhere. And guess what? Mine aren't. So now you're definitely doing the job for me.
Because I guess that's kind of what makes him scary, right? Because he could easily just be like, look, I'm going to put a knife to Audrey Hepburn's throat and make her tell me where the doll is. But he just goes through this whole charade.
Oh my God, it's so calculated. Yes, it is a charade.
Did you say charade? Okay. Anyway, I am your accomplice now. All right. So anyway, but yeah, no, it's funny because it's so ridiculous and it's so preposterous and it's so over the top and really like they have to, you know,
They have to fall in line.
Yeah.
So, they basically do, but Susie is on her way home right now. So she comes in and everybody's still there and they basically just freeze and kind of wait for her. So they realize, okay, she is disabled. She is technically blind, so we don't have to worry about being seen, but they're careful not to move. And they listen in as she calls Sam. We get to hear her half of the conversation about how he's waiting at the studio for a woman who doesn't show up. And she says, ooh, well, how about I come and meet you? And then she leaves. And then this is when the men are like, okay, time to roll up that body.
So A, love that it takes 20 minutes for Audrey Hepburn to show up in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
B, I really like this sequence, but granted, I think it works because we're playing on the character's blindness, but we have so many close calls. You know, she's touching the walls. She almost touches Carlito once. She opens up the closet with Lisa's corpse in it. Like this to me is a very entertaining scene to watch, but it does hinge on her disability. So I'm curious, Ariel, does this work for you?
Honestly, it doesn't.
Okay.
Speaking as someone, okay, when my first girlfriend became my ex-girlfriend, true story, I tried to tiptoe around her and pretend I wasn't there when I wanted to avoid her.
Okay.
I was fooling nobody. And, you know...
Because of her super hearing, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally, that was it. No, I mean, like, you just sense a presence. I mean, if you close your eyes, like, you can sense the presence of someone near you. And it doesn't really take a genius to figure out, you know, when there's someone there. Also, one other thing, even though it specifically says in the script that all she sees is a dark brown, that's not the experience of, like, most people who identify as low vision or blind. And so for me, this part really doesn't ring true either. But
so okay, I get the authenticity of it is not there, but do you find this suspenseful at all? Or does the inauthenticity of it kill the suspense for you?
Actually, I love the suspense of this piece. And I will also say that, like, you know, he specifically says, don't breathe. And so I can't help but compare it to that film, you know, and think about how different perceptions of blind people over the years and the suspense of, like, will they or won't they? It's always kind of interesting because it always relies upon this idea of, will they see through the ruse, you know, in some sense. And, you know, the fact that she believes it's Gloria and specifically says, I can hear you breathing, you know, you do get the sense that she can sense a presence there.
Right.
But, yeah, I don't buy that a blind person would realistically.
Right.
Right.
And I don't know if they put this much thought into it, but I wonder if that was the idea. If she was just like, oh, it's just Gloria playing a prank on me. She's not going to say anything. So on with my life.
I think so, because that's why we've got those mentions of Gloria being a bit of a mischievous imp. It feels like, yeah, maybe the film or the play is trying to double back and cover for, ooh, how come Susie doesn't realize this? But, I have a soft spot for disabled damsels in distress movies. As I said, I watched them with my sister and my mom. So a favorite of mine was the movie Jennifer 8, which is an early film from Uma Thurman, where she is also blind and she's caught in the center of like a murder mystery. And there's a sequence where she's in the bath and there's a man taking photographs of her. And the idea is you're seeing the flash go off, but of course she's blind and she can't see it. And that one to me stretches credibility to a way further degree, because you're just like, oh, come on.
Does it make a sound when it clicks? Like
I can't even remember, but yeah, it's just like, it's more provocative because you're literally seeing her in the bath, so it's a peeping Tom kind of scenario. But then also you're just like, he's a foot away from you. How are you not noticing this?
I'm very intrigued to talk about Susie's damselness as the film goes on.
Yeah. Okay, so Susie has left and the men roll up the body, and then we get a fade to black. So this is the moment, Ariel, that you mentioned earlier, where Susie is talking to a fellow tenant named Shatner, who was played by Frank O'Brien. This is one of the moments where we're outside of the apartment, just on the front sidewalk. And this is very much the moment where the film says, this is why no one is going to notice when shit goes down in this apartment later, because the landlord is never around and Shatner is going skiing for the weekend. So we know Susie's going to be all alone in this apartment today.
I'm going to tell you right now, this guy that plays Shatner gives a better performance than Ephraim Zimbalist, because he has something to do. But the way he like growls when they talk about the landlord.
Oh, you could tell he workshopped like a whole 2-page backstory for Shatner. Like, oh, I filed that complaint about a leaky pipe one time and he didn't fucking come down.
I just the growl was so significant to me. I was like, what an interesting choice for this character.
Wow. Trying to pull focus. Oh, I'm in a scene with Audrey Hepburn. This is my SAG card moment. So Shatner goes away and she goes inside. This is where we see Sam developing photos, and we discover that Lisa's dead body was found around the corner. And Sam is like, that's super cool, honey, but you know what? I got stood up yesterday and now I need to go to Asbury Park for some last minute bullshit thing. So I'm going to be gone all day too. And the movie says, cool.
He also kind of gaslights her and accuses
100%.
her of making it up in a ploy to keep him home. And it's like, really? That's your play? Like, okay, so you married a woman after she became disabled, and you mock her for wanting protection after a grisly murder occurs. And anyway, yeah, fascinating.
All right, so I'm gonna say what was going through my head during this scene, and this may be not great. So but let's talk about it. So I guess my mindset is that Sam was trying to not. Maybe I'm being generous here. Sam was trying to not treat her as disabled, or treat her quote unquote. Treat her.
You were going to say normal?
I don't want to use the word normal, though. I hate that.
Right.
Yeah, please don't use the word normal.
Yeah, no, I don't mean normal, but treating her as if her disability, well, I would say her disability isn't a disability, which I guess that's kind of not the point, because disabled people are disabled. So,
yes. And honestly, like, this is a whole thing within the disability community, is there are so many people who want to treat disabled as a bad word and want to deny disability completely. Or alternatively, like Sam, want to tell disabled people how to be disabled in a way that pleases them.
I think the line of dialogue, and I did highlight this line of dialogue, it's not even Sam's line, but it's when, she says, do I have to be the world's champion blind lady? And he just screams at her, yes. There's a long pause, and her reply to him is, then I will be. Just tell me what you want, and that's exactly what I'll be. And that that's the line of Susie's that I do take issue with in this film.
I think the film wants us to see their relationship as very cute in an almost screwball comedy kind of way. Like when he leaves to go to Asbury Park and they both call each other dopes. I think it's meant to be very endearing, Oh, look at how sweet they are together. She doesn't want him to leave because they're so in love. The problem is that it hasn't aged well, and it doesn't recognize what it's doing as harmful, because the film very clearly wants us to believe, oh, he is empowering her by making her independent. But it does so at the expense of acknowledging she has a fucking disability.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also the thing that, to me, is, most hideous is actually what he does at the end, where he won't even give her a hug.
Yeah, he makes her come to him.
A fucking hug after she's been through some serious trauma. And, yeah, I would have thrown a knife at his head, so.
That aspect aside, I'm curious, because Gloria, I feel like, is also pretty awful to her in the beginning, but I kind of use she's a child as the excuse. But do you view Gloria's treatment of Susie as maybe more benign than Sam's?
I do, actually, because I feel like Gloria is treated in the script as a very insecure kid who fundamentally, just is jealous of Susie. I mean, she outright says, "Oh, you're gorgeous. I guess I'll never be gorgeous." And,
Oh, I mean, we also have Audrey Hepburn saying that I look dreadful half the time.
Yes.
Meanwhile, she's fucking Audrey Hepburn with a perfect face of makeup and coif. Absolutely sheer perfection.
Actually, yeah, exactly.
But it's interesting because Gloria as a character is the most interesting thing about this movie in some ways for me.
Interesting.
Because I think that she's a female character in a fairly misogynistic movie who actually gets to have some agency and is sort of the mechanism by which Susie figures out what's going on. Gloria is also seen poking fun at Carlino and saying, "I'm a Girl Scout." And I also feel like Gloria is sort of the closest tie we have to something that feels like reality, where, she actually sounds like a normal screwed up kid. And I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to imagine what the role would be like if it had been a little boy, because part of me bristled at the idea that a young preteen girl is made to be a caregiver to a disabled woman, as though only another woman could look after someone. And I tried to envision what the movie might be like if this had been an upstairs neighbor boy. And I do think it would provide a different dynamic, but this movie works for the Gloria role because she has a bit of an arrow tomboyness, but she's still obviously very girly and mischievous. I like, it's not androgynous, but she balances that creative ingenuity that we more often would see in young boys.
Yeah, I think you said tomboy earlier, and I agree with you. There's an abrasiveness to Gloria that I was caught off guard by at first, but I warmed to, because actually the film does develop her pretty well, I would say, in her few scenes.
Well, I wonder, too, if it's hard for us to be at all generous to Sam because he's barely in this movie. When he's here, he is treating Susie not very well, but he also isn't here all that often.
Yeah, that feels like a Hollywood thing. I hate but love that now I know that he's not even a character in the play, because I also do wonder what this would have been like if we just didn't have him here.
Yeah, honestly, I wish he weren't there in the movie.
Right.
I don't think he makes anything about the movie better. But the thing is, on some level, that screwballness that's introduced by having him, even though it doesn't translate well today, I feel like the film ultimately needs that to have an ending that feels satisfying.
Yeah, but I guess, I mean, not to go back to our first conversation about Sam, but I guess the implication here is, though, that, like, because we're not given too much context to their relationship and the marriage, like, it almost feels like he married her just so he could have someone to be powerful over.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, and honestly, like, the description of how they met feels that way, too, when she's describing how, like, she was on the street and cars were piling up all around her, and then he suddenly grabbed her. And okay, just so you know, like, if you see a disabled person on the street and you grab them, you're doing something fucking wrong and you should feel ashamed. So
yeah, it very much plays like a hero complex, or maybe even a superhero complex, right? You know, I saved this lady and then I got her to marry me because we fell in love. But again, we don't know, just because we don't have any information about this character. We know he's a photographer, and we know that he thinks he's trying to make Susie more independent.
Yes.
Okay, so he fucks off for most of the rest of the movie, and we send Mike in first. So he saves Susie from a lit cigarette butt in the ashtray, because this is how we need to learn that she is afraid of fire. And he comes in under this fabricated story that he and Sam are old buddies from the Marines, and she reciprocates by telling him, yes, the details of her accident a year before.
I do love the moment, though, where he's like, yeah, there's a picture of me with him right here, and there's, like, nothing there.
There's nothing there.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is when we're introduced to Gloria, who is played by Julie Harold. She comes in, she sees Mike, she just kind of slowly backs out. And again, I think that's an endearing entrance. She's a preteen girl who finds a random man in a woman's apartment. I think she wants to think badly of Susie because she does like Sam. You know, we learned that she treats Susie badly because she has a crush on Sam. But there's also something very uncomfortable about walking into a space and seeing a strange man and just noping the fuck out of there.
Yep. Also, it is said that her mother is constantly entertaining strange men as well. And so the assumption I made in this is that she thinks that Susie is entertaining strange men, just like her mother.
Okay, that makes her behavior in this scene make a lot more sense. I did not put that together because I think I missed that line, but that makes this whole next scene make me not hate Gloria, because the first time I saw this, I was like, oh, I hate this child.
What a little bitch. Yeah, because, you know, Gloria basically comes in and throws a tantrum, and she just starts chucking shit on the floor. And yeah, Susie does call her names and she chastises her, but it's like, well, one is a blind woman who is clearly still finding her footing, and the other is a mildly sociopathic teen girl from what we know. And you're just like, this child sucks.
Yeah, but to me, like, it feels very much like she sees Susie as an alternate mother figure who she trusted, and suddenly she's displaying the same behaviors of her actual mother, and she doesn't like that. So to me, that part of this scene feels very true. Right. I do also like that we're not afraid to make a character slightly unlikable on their introduction, and then we spend the rest of the movie unpacking a little bit more about who they are and, quote-unquote, redeeming them in the eyes of the audience. Unfortunately, this scene also features, you know, the most barf-worthy dialogue ever. I'm going to literally read it to you because it offends me so goddamn much.
All right.
Yeah, you're gorgeous. What a lovely thing to say. I want to be gorgeous. I guess you can't have everything. Guess not. I wish I could do things, important things, like cook a souffle, pick a necktie, or choose the wallpaper for the bedroom. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think on one hand, it would be very easy to listen to this exchange and say, oh, this is Susie just lamenting the things that she feels she has lost as she adjusts to her disability. But then on the other hand, it's like, why these things? Yeah, specifically these things. Of all the things you could be lamenting about losing because of your disability.
I was gonna say that sounds like a man wrote this, but a man and a woman wrote this.
That is, well, Except I think Frederick Knott wrote this originally for the play.
But it was adapted by Robert Carrington and Jane Howard Carrington.
Yeah.
Although I guess maybe is this line of dialogue also in the play?
This is also in the play, and it really fucking pisses me off in the play too. So
yeah, to me, I mean, again, we weren't having these conversations in 1967, I don't think. But it's one of those things where it's like, if you're bringing in a female screenwriter, why wouldn't you have her maybe do a once-over on lines of dialogue like that, you know?
But this is also what a lot of women thought. And to be honest, a lot of women still do think it, right? You know, that's the idea that a woman's role is to be a happy homemaker. To me, this reads like, oh, it's 67, which means we've got a couple years before women's liberation fully takes shit like this by the neck and says, you can fuck off.
Yeah, so I get the complaints about why these things, but I do, like, when I watch this, I do read it more as, like, just simple things that I can't do anymore because I'm blind.
I mean, I totally understand, like, that whole concept. I mean, acquired disability is, you know, when you acquire a disability versus when you were born with it. Like, in my case, like, I was born with some of my disabilities and I acquired others later in life. And when you know what you're missing, it's a completely different disability experience.
Right.
And so, you know, I appreciate these lines from that perspective. I just really...
You still bristle.
I really hate that, you know, the things she cares about entirely are related to Sam because he's such a cardboard cutout of a human being. So, anyway.
Well, that's kind of the thing, and something that I guess, I mean, the film addresses, because by the end of the film, this apartment is her prison, but it does seem like this apartment is her prison, because she doesn't even, I mean...
She doesn't go out much.
Well, I say that, but we're introduced to her coming back from being out, but we know that Gloria does her groceries for her, so I don't really know what she does when she's out of the apartment.
She goes to Sam's studio a block away.
Yeah. And see, that's the other thing that doesn't quite sit right is that, you know, Sam is supposedly making her more independent, but then he says Gloria has to do the groceries for you. And she says, I don't want her to. And, you know, if he were actually trying to make her more independent, he would say, yes, go get the groceries yourself. But that's not the attitude. The attitude is, I know how you need to do this.
Well, and actually, I'm forgetting this. The only reason she was out of the apartment when we first see her is because she was coming back from blind school. So she leaves for blind school, and that's the only time she can leave the apartment.
Jeez, yeah.
Which, again, goes back to, disability history, because we have things like the ugly laws, where it was literally criminalized to be in public and disabled for a very long time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is in America?
Yep. This is in America. Let me look up the details on the ugly laws so I don't get anything wrong. But basically, in Chicago, there was an 1881 municipal ordinance that fined any person who is diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object.
Oh my God.
For appearing in public within the context of late 19th century imaginings of disability. This was not actually taken out of
effect
law, until in a lot of municipalities, something akin to this was still in effect until the 60s.
Actually,
jeez.
Okay, I'm looking. Sorry, I also looked this up. It says from 1867 to 1974. Various cities of the U.S. had, and they also, I guess they were originally called unsightly beggar ordinances, which were renamed ugly laws. But yeah, like San Francisco was one of these cities.
Yep.
But also, who makes the determination of what is unsightly, what is disabled, what is, you know, all the other criteria? It's like, that is a fucking slippery slope.
It is a slippery slope, and it's right back to what's going on now, where they're trying to criminalize homelessness and, you know, how do you determine who looks homeless, who looks, you know, whatever. It's all one really slippery slope, and it's also why we just need to not criminalize shit in this country.
It's like, just tell me you hate marginalized people and be done with it. Like, don't dance around it.
Non-fun fact, Chicago was the last city to repeal its ugly law in 1974.
That's right.
Ugh.
I did know that. Yep.
Good time.
My hometown. Yay.
Woo!
Oh,
God. Okay, well, let's get back to Rote, because at least that will have some bright light to look at. So we send Gloria to the store to get the groceries, and this is when Rote Senior, I'm using air quotes because, of course, it's always just Rote, but he has a full face of makeup when he comes in.
Again, it's kind of like, I think this just shows how evil he is, right? Because it's like, why go through this entire charade? Like, why do this? Like, why do you have to play 3 different characters in this, like, a con of yours?
It's so convoluted. I kind of love it. You know what? The more we talk about it, the more he does seem like a queer figure, because he's a trickster. He's so over the top when it comes to,
right now.
This ridiculous plan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, like, he is a character who feels just, delicious in conception. So,
Yeah. Because he just storms in here. It's not even a knock at the door and then he bursts in. It's basically just, oh, this door is unlocked. I booted in here. I'm throwing shit around. I'm pretending that I'm looking for my son's wife, who I suspect is committing infidelity, who is non-monogamous. And, I've traced her back here. And he's just like running around, throwing shit around. And then he steals their wedding photograph. It's just mean.
But he comes in saying he's looking for Sam, so he's not even looking for his quote-unquote son's wife. It's his son's wife's mister.
Right. Yes.
So we're already planting the idea in our head now that we're already planting the idea in Susie's head that her Sam may not be the person she's known for the past year.
Exactly. Yeah. So he basically flies in, flies out, and she's rightfully upset. And this is when Mike returns to calm her down, and he pretends to call the emergency line because, of course, folks, 911 hadn't been invented yet.
Oh, that's why they keep calling the operator.
I mean, the emergency line fulfills the same kind of function. It's just we didn't have a single catch-all number that would get you to multiple emergency services.
Got it. So, okay, how do we feel then about... Because this is kind of when, Susie is definitely in the dark for most of the next 15 to 20 minutes of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So is the misogyny kind of in play here as these men are using her as part of the con?
Definitely, because it really feels like she is such an idiot in these sequences, because I mean, I think, audiences are supposed to feel like, oh, of course she's blind, she wouldn't get it and whatever. But I really feel like there needs to be more explanation as to why she would just allow this play acting to go on in such a blatant way. I mean, there are things, that she acknowledges, that she hears the squeaking of the shoes and, the fiddling of the blinds and things like that. But it takes an awfully long time for her to get there.
I think for me, this was more so, I actually see her piecing a lot of this together throughout all these scenes. But for me, it's more so if she says something too early, does that put her in more danger? So to me, I read this as she's playing things close to the vest for her own safety, even though she is putting it together, but she hasn't put the whole thing together yet, which is why she's holding on to it.
Yeah, I read it as she has suspicions that some weird shit is going on, but she doesn't also ever get any downtime. So, there's a man who just bursts in, says all these things, and then leaves. And then Mike is there, and he's calming her down. And then he's calling Carlino, and Carlino comes in. So, it's just one thing after another. So she never has a moment to just kind of say, wait, what the fuck is going on? Why are there all these men who I don't know coming into my fucking apartment?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing more so is that I can forgive most of this. I guess it's more so the Mike stuff where I'm just kind of like, ooh, that's the one where you maybe should be more suspicious of. And she truly does not suspect him as being involved up until she learns that he is involved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do we think, though, if Ariel were playing on your idea that Sam is kind of a piece of shit, is it that she's just gravitating to a nice man, someone who actually treats her kindly?
I mean, that's my feeling about it, because I think Richard Crenna is like...
He's kind of really nice in this movie.
He is like the perfect boyfriend in this.
Yeah.
He really is. Like, he's very suave, he's very charming, he's very kind and sweet, and everything Sam is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he actually listens to Susie when she talks.
Yep.
And also, in his final scene, he's like, you know what? I'm just going to let you go. Bye.
Yeah.
I mean, I have questions about that, but we'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we introduce Rote Jr. into the mix. So this is the son with the non-monogamous wife who is committing infidelity, potentially with Sam. And yeah, this is where Susie starts to clock, there's something off. Both Rotes wore the same pair of squeaky new shoes.
But it's also Alan Arkin. I think he's wearing the same wig that he was wearing as Rote Sr., but he just removed the makeup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he took out the fake nose. So silly.
It is so silly. It's ridiculous. Honestly, I think they played up the silliness of it a little bit in this version, because I do think Terrence Young leaned into that heavily. And so did Alan Arkin in the performance.
I wonder if it's something when they're reading it, they're like, this is just, the concept of this is so ridiculous. So we have to lean into that. Otherwise, it's going to come across as like inauthentic or something. Or disingenuous.
Maybe. Ariel, can you talk about how some of this plays out in the play? Are we doing the, like, people come in, phone call, people leave, and so on? Like, is it just speedy?
So I will tell you, the really lame-ass community production that I was involved in back in the 90s, it's kind of hilarious because the entire time, you know, people are just running in and running out. It's constant exits and entrances. Mm-hmm. What was hilarious to me, though, was that they would take these ridiculously long breaks on stage to adjust the clock, because she's always touching the clock in the play to determine what time it is. You know, because they keep referring back in the script to like, oh, and at this time I'll call you and blah, 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 blah. And so as a blind character, she's constantly touching the clock. And that only happens once in the film. Mm-hmm. But there would be these blackouts for like, literally like 5 minutes while they tried to reset the clock to another time. And there's nothing else changing about the set at all. And it was kind of hilarious. Anyway.
That sounds funny. Very droll.
Well, you know, it's the little things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny too, because the constant exits and entrances, I don't think I ever quite realized exactly how there is this problem of absolutely zero downtime for Susie. The fact that you brought that up, I think, is interesting, because it makes me have a little more empathy for her as a character than I previously did. So anyway.
Yeah, because even after Rote Jr. leaves, Mike sticks around because Susie is starting to question, oh, okay, well, maybe Sam was doing some shady shit. So they endeavor to look for the doll together. So they kind of turn up the entire apartment. He's looking under the stairs and pulling out suitcases and luggage and this kind of stuff. But this is also where he's starting to realize she's a little more put together than I realized, because she, thinking he's kindly, admits, or she confides in him, oh, okay, that thing about the shoes. And what is going on with everybody touching the blinds and wiping down the banister? So she's starting to put it together.
But then her big line, I've been forgetting something very important, that I know Sam, and I don't know Mr. Rote. And I'm like, well, you kind of know Sam.
Yeah.
How well do you know Sam? Let's be real.
I mean, it's been a year. Come on.
Yeah.
But she's been really busy in blind school.
This is true. She's so busy not getting groceries and not being able to make a souffle. Okay, so Mike seemingly gets frustrated and leaves, but he does leave her a phone number of the friend he's staying with so that she can call him later. And I love the fact that we get to watch her notch the numbers in Braille using her sort of apparatus.
I actually really enjoy that. I think that's a wonderful detail they included in the film.
Because initially you think, oh, we're not going to do it. He gives her the number and says, can you remember it? And she says, yes. And then she immediately goes and uses the system so that she can. She doesn't have to remember it because she wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also the start of her incredible collaboration with Gloria, who comes back because the men have more or less left. And we put this preteen to work like it's a fucking private investigation.
And she's so happy to do it, too.
Well, that's what I really end up enjoying about Gloria, is that she has a child's curiosity, but also like the enthusiasm for a dangerous situation. She's like, oh, I wish this could happen every day. And it's like, people are dying, Gloria.
Susie's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
But yeah, so we set up the signal, okay, so we realize there's no police car outside. There's just a truck next to the payphone. And Susie's like, okay, we've been making calls. I wonder if they're going there, but she can't be certain. And of course she can't see. So she enlists Gloria with this system of, if you see men from that truck get into the payphone and take a call, you're to call me, let it ring twice, and then hang up. And I love this detail because it's so tempting. Like, I would be a stupid idiot and be like, and give me a call and tell me who it was or describe them. But because Susie anticipates there's been so much traffic through this apartment, I'm not going to be able to have a conversation on the phone. I just need something to tell me, don't trust that man.
And I will say, I mean, like, for a reason I love this movie so much is because I really do like the Susie character. I love how unexpectedly adept she is at figuring this out. But honestly, Ariel, I won't lie, listening to your thoughts on this, I can't help thinking if I'm being discriminatory by being like, oh,
good for her, she's so strong.
But if I'm thinking this about Susie because I'm like, oh, wow, she's doing all these things so well for a blind person, and that immediately is maybe not the best way to think about it.
It really isn't the best way to think about it, because honestly, like, blind people are fucking smarter than you are. I'm sorry. Like, I'm gonna say it. Like, my first girlfriend was an evil genius. Like, you are so adaptable and so flexible when you have to adapt to the world so completely that you once knew, and now it's completely different. And even though she's in this transitional period, I still don't buy that she wouldn't see through this.
Yeah. And to be clear, I wasn't saying, I think it's more so by talking to you, I'm realizing that that's kind of what's in the back of my mind when I'm thinking this, like that extra piece of for a blind woman. I'm like, oh, I wasn't thinking that in the moment, but now I'm like, shit, is that actually what I was thinking when I'm watching this movie?
But this is, again, the value of having conversations with people who have different life experiences than you, right? Because I feel the same way, Trace. I watch this and I think, God damn, look at Susie. She's doing so well. Oh, fuck, I'm being an ableist piece of shit. But it's just one of those, like, yeah, this is what you were raised to believe, and you need someone to confront you. And then it's how do you respond? So the natural tendency is that we're going to probably default into something. And I think particularly around disability issues, and Ariel, you're going to be able to speak to this much better than Tracer I would. I think for a lot of people, we have so much ingrained ableism, we probably don't even fucking know we're doing it most of the time.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and all of the isms really relate back to ableism anyway. So
right.
The idea of sexism is in a lot of ways down to the idea that, men are stronger and therefore more superior and blah, 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 blah bullshit. And then, like, you also have, when you talk about racism, a lot of that is built on similar concepts as well, in terms of the idea of physical superiority as a thing. And obviously, it's interesting because I think ableism is the ism that traces back to all of them, but is also the most insidious of them all, because it's so deeply embedded and ingrained, and everybody has an emotional reaction when they see someone that they think of as lesser than in
Right.
some way.
Mm.
And it is
Right.
interesting because, like, I'm constantly having issues with this because I'm someone who sometimes is a wheelchair user. Sometimes I use a walker. Sometimes I use a cane. More often than not, I use a cane. But sometimes I don't even need a cane because I'm having a really good day.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has seen me in a wheelchair and suddenly sees me get up out of the wheelchair,
Right.
there is this immediate feeling of, oh, I'm betrayed because I was pitying you a second ago. How dare you?
Or you're sneaky. You're a liar.
You're a
I thought you had a
liar.
disability, and here you are walking.
Yeah. But it ultimately goes back to emotional states, because if someone was pitying me and then feels like
Wait, that was unearned.
that was an unearned pity that you
Oof.
made me feel, that's not on me for
Yeah.
having an emotional reaction that I shouldn't have had. That's on you for making me feel feelings.
Yeah. And actually, I should acknowledge even, Ariel, by phrasing it almost as a question where I was looking for your confirmation, I put a certain amount of emotional baggage on you to be like, please confirm that my bias is somewhat acceptable, because it's very commonplace. So if anything, just to clarify and maybe rescue myself, I'm trying to demonstrate to folks that it's okay to be fucking wrong, and then just try to own it and be open and do better.
I love episodes like this.
It's just like, let me walk around on tiptoes because I'm stepping in it.
I love episodes because, I mean, not that I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, because, Ariel, I feel comfortable, like, being open with you about this.
Oh, yes, Ariel, you're lovely. This is all
No, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm just going to shoot my shot. I'm going to say it, and then we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the only thing you can do, because honestly, like, in this fucked up world of ours, like, everyone says things that are fucked up at different times, and, like, everyone thinks things that are wrong constantly. I mean, God knows I have. And it's interesting because I think it's only through open exchanges of dialogue and thinking through how your thinking has changed over the years. I mean, like, I know for me and for every disabled person on the planet, there's a whole lot of internalized ableism that we have about our own disabilities constantly. And there are these narratives that are constantly going on in our heads of, like, okay, well, in this moment, how do I appear disabled enough to get what I need in this moment? How do I navigate my own inner conceptions of my disability in order to do what I need to do?
Right.
But, so I'm just saying, ableism is a thing that affects literally everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just the abled versus the disabled, right? It's everybody.
Right. I would argue there's no such thing as a true dichotomy. There's very rarely a this and that, or a wrong or a right. It's really complicated. Like, the world is filled with multiplicities.
Yeah, the situation's a lot more nuanced than that.
Well, and
Yeah.
additionally, I would argue that absolutely everyone is pre-disabled. So,
Oh,
welcome to your futures.
yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. Oh, that's enticing.
I think about it every day. I'm like, oh my God, I'm 35. Tomorrow I'm going to be 90.
I mean, you hope you get to 90, bitch.
70. I hope I get to 70. Ah!
Aspirational. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so these mind games, this fuckery with Susie continues for quite some time. So there's men going in and out. We've got phone calls, but Gloria is keeping an eye on who answers the phone. And eventually we realize Mike is in on this.
Yeah. I love this moment because you can see the cogs turning in Audrey Hepburn's head as she's like, wait a minute. And then that stinger of Mancini's score, she does the whole like, no, which is very melodramatic. But I find this moment very effective.
Yeah, it feels like a genuine moment of betrayal. And I think it's hard to see because Susie has been trying to keep a brave face throughout all of this. And it's like, I'm on top of the situation. And then it's confirmation. Fuck, I didn't anticipate this. Like, you could tell she wrote, and Carlino doesn't often make that much of an impression, but like, I think she really feels it with Mike because she thought it was genuine.
I think I like this too, though, because up until this point, she thought she'd had an ally. I mean, yes, we have Gloria, but she's not going to bring Gloria into danger, which is why we don't have Gloria in this final scene. But she thought she had an ally in Mike. And so this is the moment where she's like, oh my God, I am alone in this situation. Mm-hmm. And this is when she starts Kevin McAllistering the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, I'll be honest, like, you know, the moment when she decides to start smashing all the light bulbs just makes me so incredibly happy. Because it's the first time she really has agency within the film.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's this idea of her reclamation of power over these doofuses that, you know, just makes me feel really happy and proud to be disabled.
If only she thought about the light bulb in the refrigerator.
If only, right? Like,
but God honestly, who remembers the light bulb in the refrigerator?
Wrote.
Wow.
But no, that makes me really happy. Yeah, because I think we've got like 20 minutes left in this movie, if that. And I think it's kind of a powder keg.
Sure. Yeah. I would also argue that this feels nice because it's a moment of rage. Like, yeah. I think she's kind of fucking pissed off. She's like, okay, I don't have the capacity to just leave this apartment and go and do something because I've had to send Gloria away, which means I need to look after myself. But also, I don't have to just stand here and take it. So what can I do? Like, as you said, Trace, the brain cogs are turning. So she's thinking, what do I have at my disposal that I can now control? Because she sends Gloria away, and this is before she's unscrewing all the lights, but she tries to call the cops, and it doesn't work because Rote has already cut the phone line. And she has this moment where she says out loud, I can't do this, to herself when she realizes the phone line has been cut. But then picks herself up, unscrews those light bulbs. Yeah. Yeah. We should also note that she fills the potted plant with chemicals from Sam's dark room. And this is interesting because in some ways it both does and doesn't pay off. Because I remember the first time I watched this when I was quite young, I thought, oh, okay, I don't know what chemical that is, but I'm anticipating it's going to go fire big pretty in a minute. And we don't ever set Rote on fire. And I can't help but think of how satisfying a different version is where he just goes up in flames at the end of this movie. But that's kind of the version, it's an alternate version of that famous Hitchcock tale, right? You know, the bomb under the seat, or does the bomb just blow up? To where, yes, we don't get the explosion of Rote on fire, but we're constantly like, oh my God, but literally any fire and this man can go up. Yeah. It's definitely satisfying. I'm just, in my sadistic mind, I would have loved to see this man go on fire. For sure. Okay. Also, I did want to just note that another telltale sign of the 60s is when she sends Gloria away. It's like, just go to the bus depot and wait for my husband. It's the middle of the fucking night. Which is arguably, in New York City, mind you, but that's arguably more dangerous than if she just had her stay in the apartment. Way more dangerous. Gloria has an apartment upstairs with her mother, whom, yes, doesn't sound like she's, you know, being the best mother figure, but also, like, why not just send Gloria upstairs to call the police? Her mother may be a sex worker, and we don't know that. This is true, but I mean, sex workers aren't bad people if you say they're trying to murder or steal from the blind woman downstairs. Oh, yeah, that's true. I will say, Roger Ebert infamously wrote, not a pan, but he had a very significant critique. He called this an idiot movie because Susie never locks the door and she doesn't send Gloria to the police. He gave it 3.5 stars. He just said the whole premise is built on the construction of Susie acting stupidly. So it is interesting. I mean, it is. Yeah. It definitely is. But that's so funny, Ariel. I never thought of it until you raised it. Yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many things she could have done differently if she were just a functionally intelligent person, but people don't expect that of disabled characters. So, yeah. I wonder though, how much of that, not to push back, maybe just a little bit, but how much of it is that we expect her to be a perfect combatant in this? Like, is she allowed to make stupid decisions? Not because she's disabled, but because, hey, she's
a human.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, she's allowed to make stupid mistakes because she's a human. However, I don't know.
You think the movie is too much like, oh, she's doing this because she's blind and therefore...
yeah.
Wait.
Or she's reliant on other people, or...
I will say with this specific, with the police thing, though, so she sends Gloria to the bus station because she thinks she's about to call the police herself.
That's true.
By the time she realizes the phone line has been cut, Gloria's already gone, which makes her predicament even more dire, which is why that was never really a big plot hole for me.
See, and I would argue the thing with the door is that at one point we see Carlino stick something over it so that it doesn't close/lock.
Yeah. And then you see, Rote manipulating things around the door as well. And, so there are some things that are explanatory within the film about that.
I get that the disability adds another layer to this, and this is just for me in general with horror films, I'm never a person that's like, well, they shouldn't have done this, they should have done this instead, because truthfully, in moments of panic, like, we're not going to remember even the most obvious thing. So I don't even chalk this up to, maybe it is how the writers viewed her. Oh, she's disabled, we can get away with this because whatever. I just view this as, no, this is a person who's in a panic, who's in grave danger, who isn't maybe thinking completely clearly.
Right. It's the generous read.
I will cop that as a generous read.
I mean, also, it's a Hollywood movie, and we do a bunch of things for narrative/convenience sake because this is how we do it, right?
True.
You got to move things forward.
But how good is her just sitting in this rocking chair when Mike walks in?
Oh my God, I love her.
And he's like, "How long have you known?"
Well, because at this point, like, she called him before she got confirmation that he was a bad guy, and she said, I've got the doll, because she thinks she can confide in him. And then we get the confirmation from Gloria, oh shit, he was making that call from the payphone. So, yeah, I love that she has the wherewithal to say, okay, I need to buy myself some time while I figure this shit out. So she misdirects them to Sam's studio. And then, yeah, she's just waiting around. Lucky for her, though, that it's Mike who comes back and not Rote right off the bat.
Which, yeah, I guess that's something because we have a misdirect here, right? Because he tells her, don't worry, we've killed Rote. And we see someone who's definitely not Rote getting hit with a car and run over multiple times. So many times.
Yeah.
So, I don't really know what the idea, like, why doesn't Rote come here? Why is Rote staying with Carlino? Especially if Rote, well, I guess because Rote knew ahead of time that they were going to kill him. Because he says, I knew before they even knew.
Yeah, I think he's got to deal with Carlino, so it's not cross-cut, but I always took it as these things are happening simultaneously. So Rote is dealing with Carlino while he sends Mike to go and try to get the doll one last time, and Mike tries to be a good guy and say, don't worry, we've taken care of him.
Yeah, but Mike thinks that Carlino is killing Rote, not that Rote is killing Carlino.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think I misheard you. Sorry, my bad.
No, I probably said it in a very confusing way, so you're fine. Okay, so unfortunately, none of this is going the way Mike thinks it is. So he's like, cool, don't worry. I'm just going to oh, shit, I've been stabbed in the back.
Oh, wait. You said earlier you had thoughts about him just letting her go. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, what are those thoughts? I'm curious.
Well, that's the question. Do we really believe that he is a nice guy and he was going to let her go? Because this falls back on another blind disability trope in horror movies, particularly where it's like, well, you didn't see my face, so I can let you go. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the movie wants us to think that he's a nice guy all the way through, but we just see him as the nicest of three bad men. Like, he still fucking broke into her apartment. He went to jail for all the scams.
But I think it's fair to assume or presume that he had a change of heart. Or more so, it's like this isn't worth the trouble. Because he still doesn't know what's in the doll.
Right. That is the other wild thing that they're I mean, again, it's not an insignificant amount of money in 1967, but the idea that they are doing this for a doll that they don't know the contents of for $2,000 to $4,000.
Well, they say they know what's in the doll.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, but they haven't been told. They can guess what's in the doll.
Yeah.
But I guess for me, yes, I believe this because I feel like if he was going to, like, he would have tried to get that doll, or I guess maybe come back later to steal it. But no, I do believe this is a heel turn for this character. Now, is it believable? That's up to you.
Whatever.
I mean, for me, it is believable just because even though he is a manipulative piece of shit, like all the men in this movie, it's
the best of a bad lot.
I mean, he is the best of a bad lot, but there's something that sells it for me in Richard Crenna's performance, because I feel like he does convey like a sweetness that works for me.
I think there's also a respect for her because, again, there's that part where he first goes out to the van to talk to Rote, and he's like, she's something, man. So I think because we've had, like, because the only interaction that Susie has with other people is with Mike and with Gloria, really, in this chunk of the film. So I think because we've had these scenes, even that the last time they saw each other, he was a total dick to her because she wouldn't produce the doll. I believe that after the conversations that they've had, that he would just say, fuck it, like, this is not worth it, and you don't deserve to die.
Right. But instead, he dies. Ha ha ha. So Rote has stabbed him in the back, and then he ties up the front door, which we have previously learned is the only way in or out of this basement apartment. So we chain it up, and then he just starts throwing gasoline all over the place because he knows that she's afraid of fire.
I love all of this. I mean, like, honestly, from here to the end credits, I'm on board with this movie.
And I love that he doesn't talk for so long as he's just throwing gasoline everywhere. And it's just left up to her to, just shriek gasoline. And it's interesting because the fact that he is so silent for this is...
It's scary.
It's incredibly terrifying. And I also feel like the way that the shadows are playing on his face in this entire sequence is absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
I also, like, love, quote unquote, because he fucks with her. Like, he takes this, like, sheer fabric and just starts running it over her head just to mess with her. And
it's her scarf, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's a scarf. I'm sorry. It's a piece of fabric, but that's also what a scarf is.
No, just the reason I brought it up is because if we're pretty sure that he strangled Lisa, he probably did it with something in the apartment, and I would gather it might have been this. I couldn't remember if Susie came home wearing the scarf.
I couldn't remember either. Interesting to note, though, so, while he's kind of... because he lights a fire in front of her. It kind of parallels a scene in Charade when James Coburn...
Stop it.
Because James Coburn corners Audrey Hepburn in a phone booth and continues to light matches and drop them in her lap.
Yeah.
Oh.
That is a thing that happens in Charade, and it is a very iconic scene. So.
Okay, but Trace, what does Micah Monroe think of all of this? That's what I She's never seen it. She's never seen it.
Just in context, in case you don't know Ariel, in It Follows, she goes to see Charade with her boyfriend, but then they leave before the movie starts. And then in Watcher, she walks into a theater showing Charade in the middle of the movie, but then leaves before it's over. So Micah Monroe has, to my knowledge, never seen the movie Charade in its entirety.
I didn't realize that about Watcher. I did realize that about It Follows, but I didn't about Watcher.
That's 2 movies!
That is 2 movies, and that's ridiculous. I mean, I love both of those movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Ugh, talk about shitty men. That husband and Watcher. Oof.
Yes. Yes. And more yes.
That actually has some... I mean, it's not a disability, but they actually... Well...
It's a language disability if you want to think... If you want to stretch the definition.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because when you talk about, miscommunication and misfiring, different forms of communication between those films, I think that's interesting.
And, folks, we have a Patreon episode on Watcher as well.
If it's come out in the last 5 years, we probably have a Patreon episode on it.
I'm just saying, we've got like 306 hours. So, I try to let people know every once in a while, in case you missed it, we've got an episode on something.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes, we are in the process of lighting matches, but the tables have turned because Susie manages to throw this film developer mix onto Rote, and it's exciting because all of a sudden now she's the one who's like, throw me your matches, and she's lighting them one by one. But of course, we're also in her position where every time a match goes out, the screen is left in darkness, and it feels like it just stretches on for longer and longer.
I do love, so right before she throws those chemicals, she's just like, Mr. Rote, are you looking at me? And he's like, yeah.
Because he has no idea what's coming, because he's a fucking idiot. But this is one of those things, right? The reason she's able to win this fight ultimately is partially because, yeah, she gets lucky. She's able to hide behind the fridge, but mostly because of his ableism. He doesn't think of her as a worthy adversary. Mm-hmm. And she capitalizes on it.
But also, again, you hear actual fear in his voice as she's throwing the gasoline everywhere. Like, this is the first time where he is not in charge of everything that's going on screen.
Yes. Yeah, he's starting to lose his cool. But he does manage to turn the tables again when he opens the fridge door, and she's tried to get out, but she can't open the chains, and he's now able to see her, which means he can get to her. And I gathered, is she out of matches at this point? Is that why she doesn't try to threaten him again?
I don't think she's holding the matches anymore. I think she booked it for the door and dropped them somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Which, in hindsight, it's 2020.
Yeah. Or 2024. Or 1967. Yeah. So she realizes the jig is kind of up and she pleads for her life. So she offers to give him the doll if he won't hurt her.
Oh, he makes her say, please, may I give you the doll?
Ooh.
Ugh.
Yeah, which is maybe the most, gross moment in this film.
Yes.
But, yeah.
But at least it's from a character we're supposed to hate, not her husband.
It's extreme douche chills, though. Again, though, it's so lovely because I feel like a lesser actor would have played this big and really over the top threatening. And instead, the reason it hits so hard is because he is just doing it quietly, softly, so controlling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and he's going to lie because he's going to kill her anyway.
Of course he is. And she knows it as well. But that's also why she grabbed the knife when he's extracting all the heroin from the doll. And I didn't say it earlier, but when he's teasing her with this scarf, it's very threatening. But there is an element of sensuality to it. And I love that when he says, okay, I'm going to bring you into the bedroom, which is single lady trigger warning, right? Is he going to murder her, or is he maybe going to rape her, or is it both?
Rape her, murder her, maybe not in that order,
Truly.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that as the implication, but yeah.
Listen. Is no depth to my depravity whatsoever. So,
no, yeah. but I feel like it's an obvious implication, right? He says, "Hey, we're gonna go to the bedroom," but we know that she's not going to go out of that bedroom, so he's not just going to kill her in there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he could. We don't know what happened to Lisa, but hypothetically, he did the exact same routine to her.
Oof,
but there's a whole lot of sexuality, I think, to a lot of his behaviors. I mean, when you first see him interacting with the stuff in her apartment, it's to sniff her panties, basically.
Yeah.
And it's okay, so this is where this is going. And the play with the scarf is very, sexual in terms of the way that feels like a cat and mouse activity. But then, also, the way that he grabs her by the neck is very explicit as well. So
with the cane,
with the cane specifically,
which feels like an interesting commentary on ableism, right? So much of this last act is her using her disability as a weapon to gain the upper hand, but he's actually using her tool against her. So it makes them almost equal foes in some ways.
It does in that one moment, but it's interesting that he still can't accept her as anything really worthy of
Well, and this is why she's able to stab him when they get into the bedroom. And again, the cinematography, like the lighting of this is so strategic. You can't tell whether she has managed to get the upper hand on him, but also it looks like we're making out.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is an intimate affair. And it just so happens to be the intimacy was her stabbing this knife into his stomach.
I was going to say, we're going into,
Mm-hmm.
what's it called?
Phallic
oh my God.
penetration?
Yes.
Yeah, so we kind of think, cool, the deed is done. So she has won. She just has to get out. Unfortunately, that front door is still chained up. So she heads for the window. And this is where we get that fantastic jump scare.
I just love the way this is staged because it's not shot in a way where you would expect a jump scare to happen because it's kind of, I mean, I think we still have almost full view of the apartment.
It's
in
like a
this shot.
long shot.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's not dissimilar to those shots, when someone walks in the middle of the street and we just know they're going to get hit by a car, I guess. But we're in an apartment. We're in a safe, well, quote unquote, safe space. And we think he's been dispatched. But even like, again, I've seen this 3 times now because I watched it yesterday and today. I can never pinpoint exactly when he's going to jump out of that room.
Mm-hmm.
I just love it. I love it so much.
No, it's incredible, and it's an interesting moment because it's funny. As many times as I've seen this film, like it never fails to impress me as a piece of filmmaking. It really doesn't, and really. The whole sequence, like, I feel like the fact that Stephen King thought this was such a terrifying film is interesting too, because there are certain things about this character of Rote that is a very tropey villain who just, keeps coming back for more and somehow has this superhuman ability to leap tall buildings in a single bound. But what really annoys me about this film, though, is that Audrey Hepburn has to end it cowering behind a refrigerator.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. Because it should be a powerful... I was going to say it feels realistic, because if I was in this case, I would continue hiding as well, just in case. But as the ending to this movie, it doesn't fully work for me. It kind of robs her of some of her victory. But then, as you've kind of mentioned earlier, we then end the movie with Sam infantilizing her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it very much puts her back into a damsel in distress situation where the only reason she truly survives this is because Rote runs out of steam, effectively. He can't find her in the dark, and then he dies before...
I think that means he ran out of blood.
Well... He ran out of innards.
Maybe he ran out of steamy blood,
Ooh. Yeah, it's, I don't know. Part of me is like, well, maybe this is a little more true to life, but as like, a final girl or the end of a slasher or a satisfying arc for this character, it doesn't hit the same way. And I think it's just because we like Audrey Hepburn, we like Susie, and we want her to succeed in this. We want her to finish the job herself.
Yeah. And her performance is so good in this film. Really, truly, like I love her in this film. She could have been a really great scream queen as far as I'm concerned. And I feel like we've been deprived of those roles for her.
Right.
I'm curious, though. So, I mean, hearing you say that about her performance versus what we discussed, too, about what she is doing in this role is, I'm sorry, it was cripping up? Was it the phrase? Yes,
that is the phrase.
So, I guess, how do you, as a viewer, as a critic, how do you kind of distinguish between those two things when you're praising this performance, but you have such a big issue with it?
I have a huge issue with the casting, but that doesn't mean that it's the actor's fault. It doesn't mean that she's not doing the best she can with what she's given.
Got it.
I mean, fundamentally, I think in this role, Audrey Hepburn actually did some good things for the disability community by playing this part, because she did try to do justice to the blind experience. She spent a long time doing research for the part. And in 1967, there wasn't a lot of disability depicted on screen that was authentic.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
you look at movies from, pretty much every era, and you have a lot of inauthentic portrayals, but especially in this era, there wasn't a lot going on that really showed what disability lifestyles were like. And so the moments in cinema history that I think have been the most groundbreaking have been things like The Best Years of Our Lives, where you have someone with a prosthetic limb in the lead role, things like Children of a Lesser God.
That was my next suggestion, actually, was Children of a Lesser God.
Yeah, with Marlee Matlin. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ableism in both of those films.
Right.
And the scripts are, again, written by non-disabled people, and therefore they put a lot of words in the mouths of the disabled characters that just don't belong there, in my opinion. But I feel like it's still significant every time we get portrayals of disability, because 25% of America today, probably more than that at this point, post-COVID, is disabled, and therefore we should see more depictions, not less. And, if it takes seeing people cripping up to get more depictions, then, sometimes that's a balance that has to be struck. And when you're a huge star like Audrey Hepburn, cripping up, it does mean something different.
Because she's got that platform, that profile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the nuance to this conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I think we go through something similar as queer people watching queerness depicted on screen.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, all the time. I mean, and it's the thing, like, I get into arguments with people about the idea of gay face and what that means. And it's so hard too, because you also get into these intersectional arguments over which identity trumps which identity. Do we hire the bisexual actor or the disabled actor to play this bisexual disabled character? And so often the answer should be, let's just find the queer crips and we're good to go, because I mean,
shockingly enough, those people exist too.
Did you know?
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
You can identify as more than one? What?
Yeah.
Wild.
And I mean, and that's the thing that I'm constantly fighting with people about, because, there is this perception that you can only be one thing. And whatever you are, it can only mean one thing for one community. And yeah.
Well, I think that's, I'll just use the queer example. Something like when Bros came out, there were so many arguments about the depiction of the queer lifestyle in Bros, which I found to be particularly authentic, but I know that some people did not agree with that assessment, or...
Well, sure, because it represented the part of the queer community that you and I identify as.
Well, absolutely. And, my husband, who's a person of color, he was like, I really like the movie. It's just a very white movie.
It's so white. But, it's such a white movie.
But it's also a white movie, telling a white story, which maybe isn't as interesting to him, but it's not like it's masquerading as something that's trying to tell a queer POC story, whereas something like Fire Island, I think, is. But,
Well, and part of the problem, I think, with particularly stories of marginalized communities, there's still a shortage of them. So when one comes along and it's high profile and it's got Audrey Hepburn, or it's getting a wide release in 3,000 theaters, it's like, it has to be everything to everyone, because we don't know when we're going to fucking get it again.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I get it. I totally get that mindset and that reasoning, but it's one of those things where, I think in the case of Bros, it hurt that movie and it failed because of that, or not solely because that's part of the reason it failed. And it's unfortunate because, the takeaway from Hollywood will be, well, can't do another one of these for 20 years.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's always the burden of representation, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like, okay, we had a female director. It didn't work out. That's
no
over.
more female movies. I think it's a Michelle Wolf quote where she's like, I just don't get it. You know, people, a female-directed, a female-starring movie comes out, and Hollywood's like, well, we can't do one of these anymore. And it's like, when a man movie comes out and it flops, does Hollywood say, well, can't do a man movie anymore?
No.
Even the idea of a man movie, can you imagine? I would love for that to just catch on. Can't let this man direct another man movie. Shut that shit down.
But that's the thing is, like, if the movie about a minority group, whoever it is, fails, then they say, oh, well, that's because people don't want to see these types of stories. But when it's something that's not that and it flops, you know, it's like, oh, well, something must have gone wrong, whatever. Give this director 5 more movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyway, I'm sorry. That was I know that was a long tangent, but I felt like that was a good conversation.
It's so true. And it's, you know, I'm just gonna say it. Like, we have a real shortage of people who are willing to take risks on any kind of content anymore.
Yeah, of course.
Because of the way that Hollywood and basically all of our systems in this country have prioritized profits over people.
Mm-hmm.
And fundamentally, there's a real dearth of actual representation. And I think people are hungry for real, strong, authentic representation that means something. Because I think the more you can get into someone's lived experience and the specificity of that experience,
right,
the more interesting the work is. So
yeah.
Here.
I think that's a great statement to end that conversation on.
Yeah.
So, okay, that is Wait Until Dark. Ariel, thank you so much for coming on to this. Honestly, you've opened up my eyes to a lot of things that I kind of want to rewatch the movie now with this new perspective and see how it plays for me again. But thank you so much for this. And as the guest of honor, final thoughts on Wait Until Dark.
My final thoughts on Wait Until Dark are essentially that it's a film that has shaped my life in a lot of interesting ways. And I have a very complicated relationship with it personally. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it is so historically important. Like, personally, I don't characterize this as a horror movie. I characterize it as a thriller.
Yeah, sure.
But it's got one of the scariest sequences of any movie from its time. And I feel like there are so few representations of disability that really cover specifically the corners of ableism that come out in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a thing where I deeply appreciate that I have this to point to and say, look at this piece of shit right here. and honestly, like, I really do both hate and love this film for that. So,
see, to me, that is true representation, where you're like, this motherfucking piece of shit is what gets raised up every time I mention, you know, oh, name a horror film or name a movie with a disability in it. But also, that's my fucking movie. Like, that is mine. I reclaim it.
Exactly. And ultimately, I think that's the important thing, that, you know, just like Audrey Hepburn is taking her power back by smashing all the light bulbs. Like, I think for me, you know, disability and horror in general is where I live in terms of what I like. And so I feel like I have to reclaim it myself and specifically just say, I'm going to take from this what I want to and leave the rest.
There you go.
Yeah.
Joe, final thoughts?
Trace, I don't think I could say it any better than a certain person, so I'm just going to have a quick little quote. Tabitha! In my nonfiction book, Danse Macabre, I think that Wait Until Dark is the scariest movie of all time.
Steve, you're going to say that 100 more times about 100 different movies in the next 5 years.
Every fucking time. Every fucking movie.
Yeah, I really do love this movie. I find it deeply effective. I love Audrey Hepburn in this. Yeah, this is one of my favorite movies of the 60s. I love it. But before we announce what we're covering next week, Ariel, let everyone know, where can they find you on social media? And I hear you have a documentary coming out.
I do, not for a while, but I'm actually screening the work in progress at various museums and libraries across the country over
Ooh.
the next year and a half until it comes out. We're doing it with a lot of double features with classic films like A Nightmare on Elm Street and Videodrome. So look out for that coming to a college town near you.
Oh, wait, what's the title of it?
So my documentary is specifically about my relationship with disability and horror, and it's called Monstrous Me. It basically relates the story of how, as a disfigured child at age 3, I had a bad babysitter who brought over a bag of weed, her boyfriend, and A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, dear.
And I found agency in the face of Freddy Krueger, so...
Okay.
Love this.
There you have it.
This. Oh, and where can they find you on social media?
Oh, and on social media, I am at Just Ask a Baska on Instagram. And I technically am on some other platforms, but
Not really.
not really.
We'll focus on Instagram.
Yeah. Let's just go with that.
All right, everyone. Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. If you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you love us and want to show us love, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or give us money by supporting the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you will get 306.5 hours of Patreon content.
It's very specific.
Joe is very specific about the hours of Patreon content. But yes, including this month's new episodes on Hannibal Season 1, Episode 5, a double bill of Sting and Infested, Tarot, The Strangers Chapter 1, and our audio commentary on Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell for its 15th anniversary.
Woohoo.
Joe?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. Great movie next week, but it's a difficult one. What are we watching?
Yeah, everybody, we're gonna bring the mood down just a touch as we talk about some child grooming and pedophilia. We're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Greg Araki, but it's a Mysterious Skin, so it's a hard fucking watch.
Yeah, this is maybe not a horror film, but it's a horrifying film. So
Yeah.
I have not watched it since the first time I saw it. It's one of those I was like, I like it a lot. I don't need to see it again. So
no, I love it, and I watch it like every couple of years.
well, anyway, y'all, quite a bit of content warnings. There's actually the pedophilia isn't on screen in this film, but
Yeah, it's just implied.
it permeates the entire theme, the whole film itself. So content warnings galore. Please go in cautiously, but it is a great film. But
Yeah.
until next week, we can cross out Wait Until Dark.
Indeed. And cross out Horror Queers.